Sup, motherfuckers? Welcome to another Some Idiot Reads. I'm Cy. I'm some idiot. I'm gonna read some shit here. Normally I actually would try to, be a little bit cleaner on the language to start out with. I would like to extend a sincere apology to my mother, in case she does watch this. I know earlier today you asked me to, specifically, to not use curses. I do apologize for that. I got caught in the heat of the moment here. But, we're in a hellscape. This week I'm going to be returning back to the phenomenal Dispatches from Appalachia by Coyote Wallace. And we're going to be going through one that he actually released as of today, which is June 11th. It came out 12 hours ago. As he put it, this one is for everyone going and everything going on out in California right now. I'm going to just dive straight into this, and we're going to get going. We'll have commentary and all that at the end. However, this one, they called it Bloody Harlan. Start out, Coyote, climbing a fence. Fuck you. That was added by me. The mountains of southeast Appalachia have always been things of mystery and wonder. The depths of their forests are painted with every color known to God and overflow with wild game. There are bears, coyotes, mountain lions, and even the occasional wandering herd of elk in our hills. You can walk amidst the honeysuckle and goldenrods for hours and never see hide nor hair of another person, if you don't wish it to be so. You can lose yourself to the sound of the cicadas and watch rabbits peel their way through the underbrush as they go about their business. At night, when the air turns cool and the stars come out to lay like diamonds on a jeweler's black velvet cloth, the mockingbirds begin to sing and the fireflies begin to dance. Beneath the light of the moon, the old stories of haints, fairies, and mountain magic feel as true as anything they ever taught us in school. At night, in the mountains, you can believe in ghosts and no one looks at you sideways. We all know better than to believe we understand everything that goes on in these hills. We've seen the ruin of too many fools who thought they would be the better of our mountains. Quick interjection here from me as the reader. I love the descriptive work here. I absolutely love this. It also reminds me a lot of myself as a kid growing up in Florida. And I have a very distinct memory that lingers in my mind. It was pretty easy to get onto the roof of my parents' house after a certain point. And I remember distinctly one night going out back, climbing my way up onto the roof, and just stretching out, staring up at the sky. It was perfectly clear evening, no clouds whatsoever. And the moon, it was full, and it was one of those where it has that secondary halo going around it. And that felt like magic. There was something kind of really transcendental about that stuck with me, and still does to this day. And this descriptive just kind of took me back to that, so thank you. Follows now is a picture. Mountains. Labeled. Home. And that is a thing of beauty right there. The night is when I put pen to page most often, for there is a soothing quality to the deception woven by such beauty. This peacefulness, which you can all but taste with every breath, is but an illusion. Beneath the surface, buried under years of misinformation, stereotypes, hard living, and mind collapses, is a history that burns as hot as any coal seam fire. Upon the pages torn from the history books by the greedy hands of the oligarchs, penned in the blood of everyday heroes, and bound in a culture that has always been a microcosm of the American experiment itself, are tales that have too long been forgotten. Follows as a picture. 3 African American miners who absolutely look like they are just done with somebody's shit, which, from what I've been reading in most of these, not surprising. There are fallen heroes. There are fallen heroes. Billion-dollar tyrants. Men with badges who hunt and harass immigrants at the behest of their masters. And those who rose up, no matter how many times they were kicked back down, to fight against the cruelty of those who believed they could own another man's soul. In the echoing history of our mountains, there are women who dynamited gun thug railways. There are children who worked away their youth in the mines. There are black Americans who charged machine gun nests to save the day. And there are those who fought the denial of silicosis's existence, just so the rest of us might have some air to breathe. We are your bootleggers. We are your hellraisers. We are your organizers. We are the immigrant story and the struggle of the LGBTQ+ community to be seen. You are us. We are you. I am Coyote Wallace. This is the Dispatches from Appalachia. And just because there are good people out there fighting today's gun thugs, ICE, in California, we're going to talk about another time when the forces of good were besieged by jackboots with badges. A time of fear and uncertainty, in a place where the ground itself became stained with spilled blood and the night air went sour with the smell of smoke. Today, my friends, I shall tell you of the good fight. Today, I shall tell you of bloody Harlan, Kentucky. A brief history of Harlan. What follows is a picture, Harlan in Winter, by Anthony Heflin. Harlan, Kentucky, has always seemed to invite strife and struggle, as if the land itself were a magnet for hardship. Originally, around 1796, the city was known as Mount Pleasant. This name was derived from the fact that there were several indigenous burial mounds in the area, likely belonging to either the Adena, Hopewell, or possibly even the Melungeons upon settlement. The eventual name change is owed to the fact that Confederate raiders, under the command of General Humphrey Marshall, occupied the town and burned down the Mount Pleasant courthouse and post office. It is worth noting, for the record, we are not Southerners. But there are those in Appalachia who have always been keen to sell out their identity to pander to their antebellum cousins. Generally speaking, the state was divided in its sympathies, and neither faction held the other in any high regard. This quote-unquote grievance between those of us who see ourselves as Appalachians and those who see themselves as Southerners still persists to this day. It is with no small remorse that I lament how many in this modern era have succumbed to the revisionist history that paints us as loyal to the South. General Marshall, fittingly enough, never won a single battle in Kentucky and was soundly defeated at every turn following his decision to burn parts of Harlan. This included a loss to future President James Garfield at Middle Creek, a full dismantling of his cavalry at Jenny's Creek, and the near loss of his own life 2 miles outside the city of Prestonburg at the hands of a Union Kentucky sharpshooter. And I'm going to guess that that is a picture of, the General Marshall. He looks like such a buttery baby. Losers say what? When the Civil War ended, and the people of what had been Mount Pleasant began to rebuild, they discovered that another Mount Pleasant was already on the books. Thus, a new name was selected for the city from Kentucky's past. The name Harlan was taken from Silas Harlan, one of Kentucky's first settlers and the co-founder of the city of Harrodsburg. It's been Harlan ever since. These days, With a population of just over 1,750 people, Harlan is struggling just to stay alive. But, in the days of the coal boom, one of the largest deposits of anthracite coal in the country was known to run through Harlan County. The coal operators, the men who ran the mines for the oligarchs we call King Coal, descended upon the town in droves. They promised jobs. They promised money. They promised us better lives. While the United Mine Workers of America were strong in West Virginia, their hold on Kentucky was much more tenuous. A single chapter was established in Harlan, but its membership remained weak and anemic. The Baldwin Felts Detective Agency, those who supplied the worst and most infamous of the gun thugs, had been all but destroyed following Sid Hatfield's efforts and the losses they took at Blair Mountain. But, rather than be deterred, the coal operators of Harlan simply became less discerning in their hiring practices. They took on locals with bad tempers, ran their own sheriff, and encouraged scab violence upon those who attempted unionization, with bounties and rewards. What follows is a poster. This is what the Kentucky miners are facing in their fight for bread. You must help them. Send all funds to Workers' International Relief. Aid their fight with food and funds. This, by design and the look of it, from that time period. King Coal had lost valuable territory and mines to the UMWA's efforts to bring fair pay, safe working conditions, and an end to the practice of gun thuggery in the region. Harlan was meant, by the operators at least, to be a safe haven against quote-unquote Bolshevik tendencies and the troublesome nature of quote-unquote tinker pinks, Scotch-Irish folks with Union leanings. Once King Coal had his men in place, the people of Harlan had no choice but to comply. And those who didn't, they paid dearly for their defiance to their king. Boiling point. The abuses of the gun thugs and the rabid nature with which they pursued those who sought to bring the Appalachian people together cannot be overstated. The dynamiting of houses was a common practice in Harlan, and it was as terrifying as it was effective. Gun thugs would wait until the dead of night and toss a lit stick of dynamite through the window of a sleeping, suspected organizer. They also operated with pre-signed blank warrants, essentially allowing them to enter any home at any time in pursuit of their prey. Famously, during this time, future Union organizer Sarah Blizzard would witness her husband beaten nearly blind. Follows is a caption of what I understand to be the aforementioned Sarah Blizzard, with the caption, "Sometimes you just have to dynamite a gun thug." She might have said that. She looks like a nice old lady. I absolutely believe she would wreck somebody's shit. Florence Reese, who penned the song "Which Side Are You On?", said she wrote it on the back of a company calendar after gun thugs followed her husband home, ransacked their house, and gave him a beating for being suspected of talking up the Union in Harlan. Adding to the abuses by mine security agents and crooked lawmen was the fact that miners were denied many of the most basic freedoms or dignities. While Harlan operated some of the largest mines in Kentucky, the miners who risked their lives to dig the coal were paid in scrip and forbidden from shopping at any non-company-owned store. The company stores were quick to take advantage of the miners, and it was routine to find goods marked up as much as 10 to 20% more than in a non-company establishment. This, coupled with the fact that the mining companies owned the miners' homes and could, at a whim, evict them for the slightest infraction, or raise their rent as they pleased, turned family men into little more than slaves. What follows is a picture of a Harlan Company store. There are more stories, more tales of horror and accusations of cruelty. The starving, the evictions in the coldest months of winter, the forbidding of helping one's neighbors, the outlawing of selling home remedies because it cut into the company store profits, outright executions, hangings, abuses leveled at women and children that sicken the soul to contemplate. The man in charge of overseeing the obedience of the people of Harlan is one of the most notorious and despised figures in Appalachian history. A man who, on a good day, was said to be so cruel and hateful that even the devil himself took notes. This man was John Henry Blair, better known as J.H. Blair, and only the coward Charles Lively and the butcher of Mattawan, Don Chafin, are held in nearly as much contempt. J.H. Blair, once elected Sheriff of Harlan with the help of King Cole, ushered in an era of terror and cruelty, the likes of which is scarcely fit for printing on these pages. What follows are newspaper articles. I am not going to try and squint my eyes to read through those in the course of reading this here, but it is captioned Harlan during the Coal War. No longer did the gun thug need to be brought in from an outside source like the Baldwin Felts Detective Agency. J.H. Blair was proof of concept that King Cole could corrupt law enforcement itself. They didn't need to hire outside killers if they could get the state of Kentucky to pay for their gun thugs using taxpayer money. Blair assembled 169 special deputies. Of that number, 64 had been previously indicted for felonies, and another 25 had been convicted of violent crimes. Many held grudges against the immigrant miners they felt had invaded their homeland. Others were offered pardons for past offenses. Some simply had no compunction about killing for money. Blair believed that unionization was a foreign effort to bring down America. His approach to dealing with coal miners and their families reflected his views, and it is widely known that he regarded the tinker pink as the lowest form of worker, believing we didn't know our place and were more disruptive than other ethnic groups of the time. He enjoyed the power bestowed upon him by his king, and he didn't care how many graves he had to fill with Appalachian bodies to prove his worth. What follows is a picture of this double-chinned sack of shit, John Henry Blair. Blair is said to have had a penchant for having men whipped before their families in order to force them to give up the names of their Union brothers. He also preferred to shoot up a Union meeting first and make arrests second. A real charming fellow by all accounts. That is sarcasm. Despite the tyranny, cruelty, and hardship, King Cole's little paradise in the backwoods of Kentucky may well have kept right on rolling, if not for the fact that there's nothing in this world greater than the greed of a coal operator. The wages of the Harlan coal miners were slashed in 1931 by more than 10% to account for the loss of profits to now Union-held mines, the reopening of British mines in Europe, and the fact that Germany was repaying some of its debt to America in the form of coal reserves. At the time of the cuts, a Harlan coal miner worked 16-hour days, 6 days a week, and brought home as little as $9 for a week's toil. From that $9 would be deducted the cost of the company house, the cost of the coal to heat it, medical treatment, and food from the company store. Many miners would end the week actually owing the mine operators more than they had made. Destitution is the chain fashioned by the oligarchy, and starvation is its whip, used to diminish and demoralize all people. The good people of Harlan were rapidly discovering that the promises made by King Cole were curses. Curses that would bring generations of poverty, ruin, and death upon their people. The coal operators of Harlan had beaten us. They had killed us. They had us in a place where we were no longer fighting back and simply wished to live, even if the conditions were horrid. The UMWA was in tatters, and the Appalachian people had begun to accept their fate as little more than pit ponies, to be used up and left for dead when we could no longer haul the black diamond from the deadly underbellies of the mountains. And the dirty bastards just had to take more. This would not stand. Strike. Follows a picture, captioned from the actual article. Bayonets keep pickets at bay in bloody Harlan County's little coal war. While membership in the United Mine Workers of America had dwindled since the bloody, smoke-filled days when the Battle of Blair Mountain was fought, the Union saw a swell of new membership in the wake of the wage cuts. This growing rise sent a bolt of fear down the spines of the money-hungry operators, who began conspiring on how best to derail what they feared would be a return to power for the UMWA. Little matters like decent safety conditions and living wages were of no concern. The coal operators, many of them local businessmen eager to line their pockets with the gold of outside investors, had formed the Harlan County Coal Operators Association, a sick parody of the very union they despised. This consortium of greed conspired to maximize profits, eliminate competition, and bend the very foundations of the law itself to their benefit. What follows is a picture. Armed individuals, I don't want to say soldiers, and what is almost certainly the poverty-stricken individuals of Harlan. There is no caption. I'm just drawing an assumption based on the context here. But it's fucking stark, and should be fairly familiar if you've been watching the news recently. Just in black and white instead of color in full motion. As violence began to break out between near-destitute miners and the gun thugs in the coal operators' employ, as the rumble of unionization echoed through the valleys and hills of Kentucky, the Harlan County Coal Operators Association began to ready itself for war. They already had a loyal and murderous sheriff in J.H. Blair, but they needed more than just a crooked lawman. They needed someone willing to betray the very fabric of the law in service to King Cole's continued rule. They found their weapon in Judge Davy Crockett Jones, whose wife was the lone female member of the Harlan County Coal Operators Association. Jones was the result of years of undermining the electoral system in Kentucky to keep the legislature in King Cole's favor, and he was eager to prove his worth. With just a little effort, Jones was able to turn the law of the state itself against the coal miners and their efforts to win back their dignity. Quote, "Any person who, by word of mouth or writing, advocates the propriety of doing any act of violence as a means of establishing any political ends, change, or revolution, or who publicly displays any printed matter suggesting the doing of any act of physical violence, the destruction of or damage to any property as a means of bringing about any political revolution, or who shall attempt to justify by word of mouth or voluntary assemblies with any society which advocates physical violence as a means of accomplishing any political ends, is guilty of a felony upon the conviction thereof, and, upon the conviction thereof, shall be punished by imprisonment in the state penitentiary for a term of not more than 21 years, or by a fine of not more than $10,000, or both. This is, end quote, from the Kentucky Criminal Syndicalism Act of 1920. Hypocritical as shit, isn't it? Now, armed with a law that would allow them to imprison, or kill at the slightest resistance, anyone who so much as spoke of unionization, they were free to unleash J.H. Blair upon the people of Harlan. As the strike was declared, and men threw down their picks and headlamps onto the cold Kentucky ground, the forces of King Cole readied themselves for the long and bloody conflict to come. Violence was in the air, and small skirmishes had already begun to break out across the country. What follows, a picture: miners arrested by the soldiers at Harlan. Harlan had always been a wild place, with little in the way of traditional law, an abundance of alcohol and firearms, and an ever-growing desperation. Throughout the 1920s, Harlan had a higher homicide rate than Chicago. As the struggle for unionization began to build toward a fever pitch, Harlan was well on its way to breaking even those grim records. But the harder the operators and their gun thugs squeezed, the more the union seemed to take hold. The human spirit, when confronted with injustice and inequality for too long, begins to yearn for freedom and simple dignity, the way a drowning man yearns for air. The last time the Union had come together to topple the coal barons had been Blair Mountain, and the miners had come within striking distance of victory. Optimism was taking hold once again. Those who had once stood on the edge of a dream, only to see it shot to tatters during the First Coal War, were now emboldened to take up the fight again. Little did they know how bitter the price of freedom would be. The high cost of barely getting by. Follows as a picture: several miners, armed, captioned, "The Heroes of Harlan." As tensions continued to mount, the violence began to spiral out of control on both sides of the conflict. Beatings, murders, and worse became commonplace on the streets of Harlan. Children died of malnutrition in their parents' arms, and the town resembled a war zone more than a part of America. Union men fought scabs, gun thugs, hired killers, and crooked cops just to keep themselves and their families safe. There were no neutrals in Harlan, and any man who did not side with J.H. Blair was seen not just as a threat to the coal operators' interests, but as a threat to America itself. One such example is the tale of William Clontz, a Methodist minister who preached nonviolence and told his congregation the Lord was on the side of the miners. J.H. Blair responded to Clontz's sermon by dispatching his men to open fire into the minister's home with submachine guns and high-powered rifles. Clontz was forced to throw himself over his young son and could only pray as a hail of bullets tore through his house, all for speaking out against King Cole. As starvation worsened, the families of striking miners gathered together and stormed the company store. They stole milk, bread, grain, and meat. Not fine things, not jewelry, not even guns for the cause. They were starving, and no mother or father worth their salt would think twice about robbing a company store to feed their babies. Blair responded with beatings and evictions. And still, the miners would not go back to work for their masters. Back and forth, the violence raged. murders begat more murders. Spilled blood watered trees that bore only the bitter fruit of revenge. I cannot say what broke those men, whether it was the shooting of preachers, the raping of women, the whipping of men tied to posts in front of their children, or whether it was that old, ugly friend of ours, starvation, that finally brought the matter to a head. But a real fight was brewing. The Battle of Everts was soon to begin. What follows is a picture, captioned, Everts. The only way into Harlan at the time was a rural stretch of highway through what is known as Everts. All gun thugs, all company supplies, all food and medicine that came into Harlan during the strike had to pass through this route. This was the strategic weak spot in the operator's design. In their arrogance, they never imagined that the striking miners would identify this weakness, let alone exploit it. They forgot that many of the miners were veterans. The Peabody Coal Company owned and operated the mines outside of Black Mountain. When word reached them that some of their workers were discussing unionization, they responded with strikebreakers, followed by over 175 evictions into the cold. Everts, a small town inside Harlan County, was the nearest settlement to that critical supply route, and it had become a stronghold for striking miners. The gun thugs concentrated their attention on Harlan proper, rarely considering it worth the effort to pursue organizers into a dilapidated, seemingly inconsequential town like Everts. But, one day, a Peabody truck with only a smattering of gun thugs passed through Everts on its way to pick up scab workers. One of the nearby mines had been dynamited and shut down by union workers, and the company intended to see it dug out and reopened as an act of spite. When the Union forces saw the truck, they became excited, shouting curses and promises of vengeance. They began to gather at the Everts train station. Labor spies soon informed the Peabody Coal Company by telephone that the striking miners intended to turn back the scabs. Peabody responded by dispatching a convoy of 3 armored vehicles loaded with gun thugs. Their orders were clear: protect the scabs and Peabody property, with deadly force if necessary. Dispatched from the town of Kenvere, where the scab truck was headed, the gun thugs arrived to find the road blocked and the driver held at gunpoint. Both sides agree a picket line had been formed. That is all they agree on. Follows a picture of some Harlan gun thugs. If you ask the coal operators and their families, they'll tell you their ancestors witnessed the murder of an innocent truck driver in the street, and that Blair's men were ambushed from behind cover. But if you ask the coal miners, and this version is backed by Jim Garland, who was a miner and present that day, the gun thugs attacked a black striker for simply meeting their eyes, and when they did, the shooting began. For 30 minutes, on a blustery March 5th, hell itself came to Harlan County. The gun thugs opened fire, not only on the striking miners, but on the town itself with their Thompsons. Men were beaten bloody and senseless in the street. Miners took positions in shops and fired from windows with squirrel rifles and pistols. The air grew thick with gun smoke and the bitter scent of cordite. The screams of the terrified melted into the agonized groans of the wounded. And if there was a God, that God turned their face away from the murder and butchery of that day. This was close-quarter fighting. Eventually, only the Kentucky National Guard, aiding the gun thugs, would be able to drive the miners back. This is where the name Bloody Harlan came from. Both sides took losses. Both sides watered the earth with their blood. But when the smoke cleared and the gun thugs proclaimed their victory, they had made one crucial mistake. They had forgotten Blair Mountain. What follows is an illustration. Caption: artist rendering of the Blair Mountain battle. They had forgotten what the Appalachian people do when Yankees and Southerners alike come to murder our kin for the black diamonds they imagine they'll steal from our mountains. They had forgotten that even if King Cole could buy the newspapers, the sheriffs, the judges, the houses, and the very food meant for our children's empty bellies, he could not change the fact that we were Appalachians. Something different from the Yankee fat cats and the sniveling, groveling cast-offs from King Cotton's court who pretend to share our heritage. One day after Everett's, 1,000 new UMWA miners joined the cause. 2 days after Everett's, 500 more from coal fields as far away as Logan came to stand in solidarity. By May 7th, the ranks of Harlan's coal miners had swelled to double the size of the workforce that had been employed when the strike began. Thousands of Appalachians were now part of the cause. The nation itself began to take notice of the conditions in Harlan and the harsh methods used to crush its people. Blood had been spilled. Men were left crippled and ruined. But at long last, change was on the way. When the guns finally fell silent, it would not be violence that proved the undoing of the operators. It would be American law. Reform wins out. What follows is a picture of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, captioned, "Time to stick it to Big Coal." No, to King Cole, my apologies. The presidential election of 1932 dealt a crippling blow to the forces of King Cole with the election of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The previous administrations, both those of Herbert Hoover and Warren G. Harding, had been staunch Republican supporters of the coal industry and had been more than happy to see that the law sided with the operators. Roosevelt saw things differently, and by 1933, he was prepared to show the coal operators just how different things were going to be. The National Industry Recovery Act, NIRA, was an integral part of FDR's New Deal program. The main goal of NIRA was to stimulate the economy and protect against overproduction. While the main goal of NIRA was to stimulate the economy and protect against overproduction, the act also served to set minimum wage standards, reduce child labor, and improve both infrastructure and public works programs. These were all things that the miners had fought for, but the true killing blow delivered to King Cole was found in Section 7A. This provision guaranteed workers the right to form labor unions and organize for the purpose of collective bargaining. The right to organize would later be solidified in what became known as the Wagner Act, or, more formally, the National Labor Relations Act of 1935. This ensured that the right to form, organize, assist, and discuss forming a union was protected by federal law. As no law means a damned thing without enforcement, the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, was created to enforce these new regulations and work to resolve labor conflicts before matters devolved into violence. One of the bloodiest periods in Appalachian history had finally come to an end. Follows a picture, FDR and John L. Lewis, the head of the UMWA. Now protected by federal laws and hungry for reform, the UMWA swept across Harlan. By the end of the decade, Harlan would go from one of the tightest held jewels in King Cole's crown to a bastion of Union activity. The victory of those miners, organizers, and their families had been won through hardship and endurance. Their long struggle had come to an end, and the rights of every working American had been improved by what they had accomplished. Neither the fist, the whip, the gun, nor the grave had been enough to kill the Appalachian spirit. Though the fight had been long and bloody, the day belonged to free men and decency once more. King Cole was far from vanquished, and the exploitations and challenges the region would face were still many, but the Appalachian people had proved the oligarchs could be defeated. New faces and old trouble. What follows is a picture, much more recent. California protesters being attacked by modern gun thugs. I mean cops. I will close this dispatch, not with words from my fellow Appalachians, nor with pontifications on the history of our people. As a historian and an American citizen, I believe that we are currently living through a history that eerily mirrors what the Appalachian people have already endured. A terrible beast has been once more born into this world, a three-headed monstrosity that rises out of the darkest waters of America's past. On each head is written a name: oligarchy, racism, hate. Another picture: current events. As I write these words, the good people of California are besieged by the efforts of a tyrant. The crime of the Californian people is that they have risen up against the modern-day gun thugs that call themselves ICE, and now our president threatens them with death. Armed soldiers, Marines, are being deployed, as you read this, for the purpose of breaking the back of any resistance. The LAPD have already fired rubber bullets and gas canisters at journalists. The very governor of the state is being attacked for standing with his people against the vile practices of ICE. Make no mistake, the gun thugs fought by my ancestors are the ancestors of ICE. Our gun thugs were tasked with harassing and breaking the will of immigrant peoples, and the gun thugs of ICE have taken on those same tasks. The gun thugs of our past were given badges and bestowed with legal authority, and so too is true with ICE. Just as the Baldwin Felts agents and J.H. Blair's Breaker Squad were given the ability to jail others, and just as that ability did not grant them the moral responsibility that should have accompanied that power, the same can be said for ICE. The National Guard and the Marines now prepare to make war upon innocent civilians standing against injustice. This is the same posturing and behavior that precipitated some of the deadliest moments in the Cold War. Another picture: current events. I ask each of you to spare a moment and offer a thought, a prayer, a bit of love, support, whatever you can to help in this struggle. We, the people of Appalachia, know the feeling of the tyrant's boot upon our throat. We know the terror caused by men with hate in their hearts and badges pinned to their chests. California, our brothers and sisters, you are seen, you are heroes. Solidarity forever. Damn. Well, I'm marking that one with a quick clap. Cool. Good deal. So, that was... They called it Bloody Harlan. First things first, getting this noted. When it comes to these articles written by Coyote, I want to go ahead and note at the very end here, the dispatches from Appalachia are entirely funded by donations from readers like yourself, like me. And these donations keep the dispatches coming and keep them free for everyone to enjoy. If you enjoyed the dispatch, you can leave a tip following the link here, and it will go a long way to helping out. As an aside, I will also have a direct link to Coyote's Ko-Fi in the description of this video. You also can click right here, little hand icon. That will take you to the Ko-Fi. Make sure, give it a clap, not B clap, a clap, to boost itself in algorithm. And let's see for a response. Oh, what do we got with this one? Jesus. There we go. I think that's a solid comment here. Leave a comment yourself as well. Go to the article, show it some love directly. It deserves that. That'll help it boost. Share the article. Share this video if you're inclined. But more importantly, share the article. He's the one that he is the writer. He's the one that deserves the attention on this. And I will comment very briefly here myself as far as it goes for a lot of the BS that's happening right now. I'm a political ideologist. I'm an armchair at best. And I know I actually started out this entire channel run of things with my readings of Project 2025. I make no secret of the fact I have very strong political leanings, but I want to be clear, I am not necessarily the person you should listen to. You should assess and formulate your own perspective on what's going on from a diversity of sources. That being said, it is a fucking travesty of what the hell is going on out in California right now. As of 7:57 on June 11th, 2025. This I understand the struggle directly of what those people out there are dealing with. I've faced that sort of thing myself in the past. It requires an immense amount of courage on the part of the people out there, boots on the ground in California and in areas where other protests are being held and coming together. I am old, and it's a lot less likely for me to wind up out in a protest environment these days. I've done it a time or two, usually to assist friends and others that have wanted to go out but haven't been sure or have felt, concerned about where to start. But I have nothing but respect for the people that are out there on the ground, standing up in the face of what is, frankly, abject fucking tyranny. And it's the stupidest fucking thing. I honestly thought by the end of this, I knew going in that this article was going to relate, in the end, back towards what's going on right now. And I thought maybe I'd have more to say, more to comment on, but right this moment I don't. I am genuinely at a loss for words to just say off the cuff that isn't essentially just screaming fuck for, until I run out of air. I want to echo what Coyote called out in the course of this article. Whatever support that you can, even if it's just drawing attention to this miscarriage of everything that any decent society should have. Show support for it. Share articles. Share memes calling it out. Make fun of a racist and a white supremacist. Share this article. Check out other news information out there. Just everything you can to draw attention to the horror that this bullshit is. It does help, a bit at a time. Even if you feel small, if you feel like you're not going to be able to do much, everything helps. So, again, I am going to shill for my dear Coyote brother here. Please give him a tip if you can afford to do so, and without actually harming yourself. Give some algorithmic love to the article itself. This is a really good one. I think this is a fantastic piece of work you've done here, Coyote. I want to say that to you directly. This is fucking awesome. And if by some chance this is seen or heard by anyone that is or in the future has been boots on the ground there in Cali, again, you guys have my deepest, sincerest respect. I hope like hell that you guys are able to stay as safe as you can, knowing that's not likely a prospect out there. But I hope that you gave them hell. Deuces.